Well, it is absolute delight to have you here, Wendy, because we have already read your book several times, and having all these questions, burning questions. And I also had a privilege of listening to your keynote recently on the National Child Day, and there was something that you said that really struck me, and this is a statement that I will read from my notes, and it's, you said that learning stories is a philosophy. And I'm just wondering what inspired you to connect the two concepts of story and assessment for learning, which essentially some people translate learning stories to be, to be central to this philosophy that you referred to.
Well, actually, I might need to go back a step or two with the birth of Te Whāriki, our curriculum. And Te Whāriki really was such a turning point in New Zealand education, and particularly in early childhood education, as it brought into view a completely different way of looking at curriculum. And many of us actually were very reluctant to have curriculum, because we were fearful of the notion of curriculum, because we thought we would get some sort of top-down school-based curriculum. But of course, the government was very clever. By engaging both Helen May and Margaret Carr as the lead writers, immediately this shifted things for a lot of us in the community. We thought, Margaret and Helen understand, they know the community. Margaret was a kindergarten teacher, Helen was a primary school teacher but had been a childcare worker, and both were enormously regarded and respected. And immediately they engaged Tili and Tamatiriri from the Kohanga Reo movement. So this process began, and the notion of Te Whāriki as a bicultural and also a socio-cultural curriculum evolved. And the pathway to the birth of Te Whāriki was 5 years of true consultation. Every possible group in New Zealand early childhood education, whether it was kindergarten or childcare, home-based settings, Kohanga Reo, Pacific Island Nest, people working with children with special needs and special rights, all were actually immersed in this document. And back and forth conversations would be held, information would be fed, Margaret and Helen would write papers, these would be fed back out in the community. Constantly addressing the issues of real concern around what a schoolified curriculum as opposed to an early childhood curriculum might look like. So the birth of Te Whāriki was a fabulous moment when people saw, this is about belonging, well-being, contribution, communication, exploration. This is what we do, lifelong learning. And I guess it was so in sync philosophically, but at the same time, it was much deeper than we really imagined. And following the birth of Te Whāriki, the government recognised that if we didn't address the issue of assessment, we would actually be in trouble, because we would have old assessment practice, the checklists, the running records, the time sampling, all of these old ways of being based on a more developmental psychology viewpoint would drive our new curriculum, and we wouldn't get the benefit. And so Margaret won the contract to actually look at what might assessment look like now that we've got this new curriculum. And she again went back to the broader group. There were a number of working parties. I was involved in the kindergarten one, and in kindergarten, and we started to write narratives. She got us writing narratives about learning and watching and observing and writing stories. And she came back one day and she said to us, I have it. It was her inspiration. She said, you are writing learning stories. And so that was really, it's been such an extraordinary journey, the notion of learning stories, and it has captured the imagination of teachers all around the world. And I guess one of the things, my turning it to a philosophical idea rather than just assessment, was the fact that I was very determined as a person very much involved in professional learning, that people didn't see this as some sort of form or format or formula that you write a story, because actually if people see it like that, what they do is they just write their old observations inside the forms, the emperor's clothes, and you can't be seen. And it was the the engagement of writing these stories and thinking about those substantial shifts in educational practice and theory that changed this sort of notion from just assessment, but sociocultural assessment, thinking about the power of narrative, thinking about empowerment, so central to our curriculum that you could no longer actually do checklists and developmental framing if you said you needed to, the assessment practice must see the child as capable and competent. So there are so many ideas that sat underneath learning stories that meant it was more than just assessment, it was a philosophical approach, and you needed to think about those wider issues before you could actually do great learning stories. You had to change your practice, actually.